Good evening. My name is Mark Kruchnet. I'd like to call to order the June 11th meeting of the Ross ADR. Before we do anything else, it's open time for public comments. If any of the people in the audience here or at home want to speak for something for up to 3 minutes that is not on the agenda, now is your time. Okay, we'll do a quick introduction of the ADR members. I'm Mark Kruchnet, as I said.
I'm Joey Buckingham.
Stephen Sutro.
And Mark Fritz.
I read over the May 21st minutes, and they seemed fine to me. Does anyone want to second their approval or suggest changes?
I can second them. No changes from May.
Okay, great. So to move on to the first project is 34 Poplar Avenue. We'll have the town, just in case anyone at home or our audience member hasn't been here before, the way we do this is the town presents a project, then the owners and their design team makes a longer presentation where the ADR can ask questions of them. And after that, we then open it up to the public. If anyone wants to speak about a project for up to 3 minutes, that is their time. Then I bring it back to the ADR and only the ADR for our recommendations to the town council. And the first project is 34 Poplar Avenue.
Yes, good evening, ADR members. Tonight, the applicant at 34 Poplar Avenue is requesting a recommendation to the town council for design review, a minor exception permit, and a variance. The project is proposing to construct an outdoor kitchen and in the covered patio area between the garage and the main house, as you can see here on the PowerPoint. The project includes a new heat pump within the side yard setback, which is shown and highlighted. The project also proposes to construct a 4-foot auto gate on Redwood Drive and a new 6-foot entry pedestrian gate on Poplar Avenue. Staff did receive a couple of comments from neighbors being concerned about the noise from the outdoor kitchen. And a variance is required to construct an outdoor kitchen within the side yard setback, and a minor exception permit is required for a new heat pump within the side yard setback. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Would the owner and or their design team like to make a presentation? Actually, because these are recorded, you could turn on the microphone and then talk.
All right. I am the design team representing the owner, who's also in the audience, if need be. And I just want to kind of go over and clarify a few things, because we've been here before on roughly this project when we did the ADU. And there were a couple of, I think the easiest way to say this is, as we got through the design review, we aren't thinking about our heat pump. We aren't thinking necessarily about functionality in the downstairs space. Typically on a project, this is all within, the setbacks and there's no issues, so we're not here. Today we're here because we have a couple of things that as we got into the CDs and even into construction, we realized that there were different locations or there were different options for things. For instance, I'll start with the heat pump. The heat pump, we want to put it adjacent to the existing heat pump for the main house. So we're not asking for anything beyond what was already granted in a minor exception. Jeff has talked to the landlord over at the adjacent property, and my understanding as of today is there's no issue over there. So we're just trying to do what's already been done, move that device a little bit out of the sort of backyard area, because if we can't put it over there next to the existing one, we're really going to have that in the backyard, which will have some impacts on my clients and likely on the residential neighbors as well. The same goes for what Alex is calling the outdoor kitchen. I prefer to call it a service bar since there's no cooking, there's no stove or anything like that. There's some refrigerators, there's a warming drawer and a sink. I think first and foremost, this is sort of where my clients are going to be entertaining outside. This is a covered patio space, as we know today is, rather hot. So it frees up the yard to have a table and, outdoor dining space in what we're calling the grotto, and then leave the yard as a yard. I think that also, again, benefits the neighbors in that this is the location where a couple of years ago, it was approved for an outdoor kitchen because it is adjacent to the commercial space and it is far away from these neighbors. And the neighboring houses, both of them to the, what I'm going to call the east, I guess it's the south, are in the setback. So they're very close to the yard space. So for their benefit and our benefit, having this kind of functionality in this location both provides my clients with privacy, but also buffers the neighbors. I believe a 4-foot tall auto gate is under the requirements for this, but in talking with staff, when we brought that up, they said just include it here. And then can you go to the last page, Alex? I just want to just show everyone why we're asking for a 6-foot tall entry gate. And this again has to do with location in Ross and privacy for my clients. So my clients have I think, Jeff, you'd say you have a wonderful house in downtown Ross, correct? But they're also adjacent to the commercial downtown. And this does have some privacy concerns. And right now they have a gate that's 4 feet tall. There's a little bit of an appurtenance put on top to help preclude people from just looking in as they walk down the sidewalk. There you go, Alex. If you could zoom in into the upper left corner, that'd be great. There are 2 photos up there that I just want to just go over this briefly, and then I'll conclude mine. So currently, right now, there's a hedge that's about 4 feet tall, similar to the gate, and then above that, there's a prune screening. I'm not quite sure what type of plant that is. And then at the gate, there's just a little kind of keyhole opening between those plants. And just again, from the location adjacent to the commercial zone, my clients would just really like to have that keyhole pleasantly, but kind of, what's the word I want, blocked by using a taller gate, just to maintain their privacy, given the location next to the commercial building. And that concludes sort of my rounding out of what Alex said. I'm happy to answer questions from the design review board if you have any.
For the new proposed gate, what does it look like? What would it look like?
It would be similar to what we've got, except we're going to go with horizontal wood as opposed to vertical wood. So if we zoom up, that's the, yeah, there we go. And the idea is currently is to use a weathered ipe. So basically install an ipe gate, let it weather, and then seal it so that it's sort of more in keeping with the tonality of the planting around it.
And it's a little hard to tell. Would that be solid or slatted like the current one?
Slatted. So we'd have 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch slats. So you would be able to see through, but it would provide enough of a screening from a privacy standpoint that somebody couldn't stand at the top of the gate and look into my client's yard.
Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned in your talk that we did see a kitchen in this grotto. We've seen this project a couple of times.
Yes.
Can someone explain to us what we approved? Did we approve a kitchen down there at some point, or was it a proposal, or what's the history of it?
So it was a proposal. It kind of got confusing here. It was a proposal from the landscape architect a couple of years before I got involved with the project. You want to?
Yeah, I mean,
Jeff
so
knows the history.
when we came in 2020, there was a full kitchen barbecue.
Right, I remember that.
Brad Giusti did that architecture, and it had refrigeration, barbecue, kitchen counter, all that up against the, so what is that, the north side? Yeah. And then in the drawings, when we'd come to ADR this time, it was actually like in, out. So there was some version control where, it didn't get on the final. And so, we did have this in here at some point. Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I remember seeing this, but it
Yeah.
was always on the north wall. It wasn't
Exactly.
perpendicular.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it just kind of moved around to this other location. So that's why we're here.
All right. And then the screening, I think there's screening approved on that, like it's 2 feet from the property line, I think. Can you describe what that is? I think it's, is it a wood lattice or something, if I remember correctly? Okay. And that's already approved. It's already, well, it's not there yet. But it's approved.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We don't have anything to do with the skylight. I think the skylight was in the submittal as well, but there's nothing about the skylight. Okay, great. I think those are the only questions I had. Is it?
Did you have a question? Please.
What is the black material?
The black material, can we go, Alex, can we go to the drawings just so I make sure? Because we always had a frame around the opening to the grotto. That's always been there, and that material was probably going to be a metal material. So probably just a standing seam metal material because it's the best one to make a transition from a low slope roof down to the wall, and we want that to be a monolithic. The cabinetry there is probably going to be,
It was just the black material on it.
Just the,
Yeah.
what is that frame made out of?
yeah, that frame is metal.
No.
And the metal's already there on the
Yes.
top side.
Yeah, that was.
Is it
that
like
was-
galvanized or what's the?
It'd probably
finish?
be a Kynar finish, yeah, and that was approved in our last round.
Okay.
Alex, could you, oh, sorry, are you done, Joey? Yes. Alex, could you go back to the driveway gate rendering? So on this, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it looks like it's sort of a 4-foot-ish fence going, or how tall is the driveway gate? Sorry.
It's maximum 4 feet.
So, but it's sitting next to a 3-foot-tall fence?
No,
Because,
it'll be 4 feet across.
4 feet across.
Yeah.
It'll be 4
All
feet.
that fence.
because in the rendering, it looks like it jumps up.
Yes.
But it should be the same height.
It
should
will
be
be,
the same-
it
it
will
will
be
be,
the same height,
Okay,
yes. Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Let's just say that I
current
was working
fence
for a
just needs to be
quick
replaced.
deadline for Alex to get this around, and getting the fence all the same size would have missed that, but we will
And
do
I
it again.
realize because it's 4 feet,
Yeah.
there's no, you're not doing it for privacy because obviously most people walking by, unless they're really young, are going to be taller than 4 feet. But they often look nicer, and it's a little hard to tell in this rendering to me. They're supposed to be sort of not more than 50% coverage, meaning like you'd have a 8-foot slat and then an 8-foot gap, et cetera. Does this conform to that? It looks like it's more
It's more solid than that. We can look at making it more transparent. I don't think we have
Yeah,
an
yeah.
issue with like.
Yeah,
the
Mark,
trans-
I don't have an issue with that. It's kind of like, incomplete, kind of, I mean, it's,
Because I think, and I'd like to hear the architects opine about this when we make our comments, if they think it would be better to have it maybe just be, even if it's not 50%, if it's maybe the same proportion of coverage that the fence is, like if the vertical fence is 75% wood and 25% air, maybe it should be the same as that, just to look like it fits with what's
the
existing.
current one? I mean, it feels like the slats are all like lined up.
It's a vertical.
Yeah, it looks
pick.
like
It's a
it
little
looks
bit
like it's
more-
80%
Yeah.
or 90% wood and then little slats. So maybe, I'd just like to hear their opinion if they think it would be better looking if it matched that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the transition is honestly incomplete, and the reason we're going to horizontal is I think it fits more, and I think, Jeff, you'd agree, it fits more with the sort of architectural direction we're going, as opposed to the sort of standard white picket fence that's been existing since before you bought the house.
And then speaking of fences, On the other side, where you've got the pedestrian gate, and it's now sort of the 4 foot tall, and it's got the keyhole above it, could you go back to that? Because it looks to me very nice how it is now. And I'm wondering, well, I'd like to hear the other's opinion, but it seems to me it would be nicer looking if it was just exactly like that, except, you know, however much taller you wanted it to be. Like if that's 4 feet and you're aiming for 6, but I just like to hear their opinion.
Yeah, sure.
It seems like it might fill in, if it was rounded on top again, it might fill in that sort of, and I think have a great idea with the extra privacy, but by having that curve, it might fit in with the bushes above in a nicer way, but I just like to hear their opinion. Or your opinion. Maybe there's a reason that you think the more rectangular look is
horizontal,
better.
like Tristan said, fit in with architecture. It's a little more modern. You know, so I don't know. I'd love to hear, Mark.
Yeah, I just like to hear their opinions.
I have a question. Is the white picket fence with the vertical picks, that's staying? Or are you going to build a new fence on the back of the property, the Redwood Drive?
Should all match.
We're going to match eventually.
So you're keeping that white vertical?
We're gonna take the white vertical out and put a
And do
horizontal
so- okay.
fence, yeah. It didn't make it into this presentation. This was a challenge because that was added at the last minute.
Okay.
After talking with staff. And because it doesn't rise to the sort of height of requirement for ADRB, it was like, well, do I spend a lot of time and miss the deadline, or do I just get the
Right,
idea of the
got
gate
it.
in? And so it's a
And we
bit
wanted to
incomplete.
just get it all out,
Yeah.
to be above board.
I do have opinions
Thank you.
about that, which we can discuss when
Okay, great. Any more questions from the ADR? Okay, so we have no more questions. So you guys can sit down and
I'm
then.
sorry, I thought you had a more opinion you want to give.
Oh, no, that's
that'll
at the end.
come-
That's just like
That'll
when we
be
make the
give our-
recommendation.
when we
Thank you.
give our- Thank you.
And now, if there are any comments from the audience, either here or at home, now would be a time.
We have no raised hands.
Okay, so, and actually, before we go to the recommendations, let me ask a question. One person wrote in 2 or 3 emails. The first 2 were basically saying they were notified, but they don't need to be notified. I mean, they were notified by the town. They're just saying they hadn't seen the plans, and that's, I realize, their responsibility to come look at the plans if they want to see it. But they're not the commercial property that's right adjacent to this, so are they the people that are on the other side of the property from this, or are they someone, right, so they're on the other side of the property, so I would think that the heat pump would actually be, as far as they're concerned, that'd be the best place for the heat pump, because it's literally blocked by a house from them, and then we can decide if being on the other side of the lot in the setback, we think it matters to the house on the other side of the lot. Okay, thank you. Who would like to make the comments first? Joe? First.
Okay, so I have no problem with any of the proposals. All of the things you want to do seem completely legitimate to me, and I can make findings for why there can be these exceptions made. The heat pump and the setback, it's next to a commercial building and a big stone or a CMU wall. And I find that the placement of this outdoor kitchen is probably the smartest place to put it, because it's basically hidden from the neighbors and it's not going to cause any privacy concerns. And I can see why they want to have a more private gate at the front yard, because that is it's really a public street, and I wouldn't want people looking in my front door either. So I approve of all of the suggested improvements. What I have more of an issue with is the cohesiveness of the style from the front to the back, and kind of what you're doing with this house. And I know it used to be this cute little cottage, and it was kind of a historical cottage, and I get that you're trying to give it a more modern vibe. So I understand that's the wish of the client. But I would make the language the same from front to back, and make the fence in the back have something to do with the gate in the front. And it's also a style thing, but I feel like the black frame around the outdoor kitchen and that grotto is sort of oversized and too black for what it is. It just kind of, it's just a subjective design opinion. It feels too heavy. But I would make those fences in the front and the back talk to each other and have something to do with each other. And then probably plant a big hedge behind that 4-foot fence. So when people are walking by on Redwood Drive, they don't look into your garden. Okay.
I agree with everything you said. I think the kitchen does not exacerbate or make kind of more intense the noise or use under there, and so I think that that's fine. I think the heat pump is in a good spot. I think that the automobile gate should match the fence. Horizontal seems great because it matches the language of the more modern house. I agree with the idea of matching it to the front. And if it's all Ipe, great, or if it's all whitewash, great, kind of thing. So I think the continuity, even though they're on different blocks, it's kind of just cute to know about it and kind of recall that. So I think that's a stronger thing to do. And I agree with the idea of making it 6 foot because of the nature of the street right there and relationship to the commercial district. So I think that's it. The black was there before. I know you're lodging an opinion, which is they can respect, but.
It's a little blacker in the so it's not necessarily that dark.
Yeah, I don't have anything new to add. I would agree with both of the comments that are made. I would say that on Joey's color and the band on that grotto it's about the heaviness of it also, right? To me, it looked, I don't remember seeing that there the first time. Yeah, the width, the depth of it all, but it's an aesthetic opinion. I think you're right on it, but yeah.
And I agree with everybody else. So nothing to add other than my agreement. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Okay, and the next project is 118 Winding Way. Alex, would you like to make a presentation?
Yes. Good evening. All right. Tonight, the applicant at 118 Winding Way is requesting a recommendation to the Town Council for design review and a variance. The project is proposing to construct 2 stone retaining walls, and one of the walls will measure 7 feet and 10 inches in height. That little portion there will be the tallest point of the wall. The project will also include expanding the approved gravel patio by 310 square feet and will include recessed lighting and 2 stone low seat walls. A variance is required to construct retaining walls over 6 feet in height, as well as to construct a patio and retaining walls within the side yard setback. And I do have some other renderings showing the retaining wall and the patio. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks. Would the owner or design team like to make a presentation?
Good evening. Ron Sutton, the architect, turned landscape architect in this case. Jim and Mary Bowie own this property, and they're on Zoom, I believe, listening in this evening. So a little history of the property. This lot is currently 2.7 acres. At one point, it was a very large piece of property. And it was interesting, this year is its 100th a centennial anniversary of the house that was built in 1924. It was interesting that the pool was built first, long before the house was built. It was a summer escape place, and then later the house was built on top of the hill there as well. We did a major remodel restoration to the house in 2012, inside and out, and that was done in 2012, and then in fall of 2022, the ADU was approved, 800 square foot ADU. And so now this is kind of the final little piece of all of this, is connecting we have three things. We have a house and that meets the 45-foot side yard setback and pool. And we have the third element is the ADU, which doesn't have to adhere to the 45-foot setback. So it is inside the 45-foot setback. So now the challenge here is on a very steep hillside lot is to connect the dots, so to speak, to connect these areas that aren't connected now. And so that's where we proposed our connection here is between the terrace of the house, the pool, and then the ADU. And so a small portion of this terrace, 3 feet of it, instead of a 45-foot setback. So instead of a 45-foot setback down to the neighbor property, the house, when you look down, if you were up there, is pretty much right on the property line. So it is in their setback, obviously. And so the property line is basically right down at the base of that hill. So it's instead of a 45-foot setback, we have this wall that is partially in the setback, and the setback is 42 feet. So it's 3 feet for the most part. But then there is the wall that goes perpendicular to that. Is this thing? Well, there it is. Okay, for some reason it doesn't stay on. I have to hold it, I guess. Okay, so the little portion, this wall here is about halfway down, starts to be into the setback. And then, of course, the projection across to the ADU, which is allowed in the setback, is the wall then that also is in the setback. So that's where the variance occurs, that we want to tie these together, and with a steep bank, we did not find another way to do that. So the Bowies have worked very closely with their neighbor, at least obviously getting approval for the ADU, which is considerably higher than these walls. At this corner right here, this 6-foot, this wall right here, at the top of the wall up to the top of the ADU is 11 feet taller, which, where are we at here? Something strange with this drawing. It's right here. So here's the top of the wall, and then the ADU is approved. It's actually up here 11 feet taller still. So it's substantially higher. The lower wall at 6 feet down here, it's 22 feet up to the top of the wall. So that's all. So the walls are fairly substantially smaller than the height of the ADU, which is actually approved to connect things here. So the issue is, of course, the hillside ordinances were created for a long time ago, long before we knew anything about ADUs. And we didn't have the issue that we'd ever build anything in a side yard setback, or we wouldn't be allowed to, more than likely. So now we have ADUs in side yard setbacks, which many times want to be connected to the residents, because if they're used for elderly parents or caretakers, somehow there has to be some kind of addressing of how we're going to allow ADUs to be connected when they're in the setback to portions of buildings that aren't in setbacks, if that needs to be done, whether it be a parking structure, whether it be an outdoor terrace. I mean, it doesn't really address this in the hillside guidelines, of course, because they were written ordinances before we had ADUs, and ADU ordinances don't really address it either. So there's kind of this issue that may occur more often in the future or not. So these have to be looked at, I guess, individually in this case. But to mitigate what we've done, I mean, the Bowies have worked very close with the neighbor below. They've been working with them with the design of the ADU as well as these walls. They've put up story poles long time ago to show them what was going on. They literally can't see them from below. So they're the only people that would see these. And they've signed a letter of approval that they're okay with it. And also to mitigate, we've made this terrace a totally impervious surface. So it's gravel. And then the path, the pavers will be set in sand, connecting, so we won't be really increasing the impervious surface. We did increase it slightly just because we have a few more retaining walls than we had before, the length of them, so it's about 32 feet, and that's the top of the retaining wall. I didn't know if we were supposed to count it as an impervious surface or not, but we did. So that's that. As far as cut and fill, we worked very hard to balance that but by the amount of dirt that we would have for the drilled piers and for the footings. It basically looks like it's going to balance, so there shouldn't be any necessarily off-haul of anything in particular in this case. So I think that kind of addresses it. We'll have to have a guardrail. The guardrail, if you've been out to the property, they've got these beautifully artistic designed railings. They use an artist to design them, and they're beautiful. And they will have those, the top of the retaining wall for the terrace above is flush with grade to minimize the height of the wall. It doesn't stick up at all. There's no curb. And then the very open metal rail is on top of that just as a guardrail for keeping the grandkids from falling over. And I think that's kind of what we have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
I have one quick question. In that site section, which is the proposed east elevation site section on DR6, yeah, right there. Is there a planting plan for the area between the walls?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot that part. Yeah, so there is a planting plan. There were originally laurels all along this side of the property, and some of them we were able to save down. We actually be able to save them. They're down here. We saved from this corner down. All of these have been saved. And then these will be new laurels planted to make that a green wall. And then there's a landscape plan in your set. And then there's ground cover planted on the hillside here. So the hope is that all of it will be green when we're all done with it as far as that's concerned. So the laurels go quite fast, and they'll plant some really nice ones. And they've also indicated again, the rendering doesn't show really the oak trees that are in between the two properties as well. And the Buoys have talked with their neighbors, and they don't, they love their neighbors. So if they need another tree somewhere, they will certainly work that out with them as far as that's concerned.
I don't see the planting plan in the set.
It's in there.
What sheet number is that?
Hang on.
I don't think it's in our attachment anyway.
Sheet DR4.
DR4 is here.
The one on the right?
The one on the right. Oh, okay, there, yeah. It doesn't say what species those be or what size box they are or anything like that.
It says there's a planting legend,
Existing planting.
Philotena Fraser, 5-gallon. That's a plant. It's interesting because we can't replant laurels technically because it's either not on the municipal water district one or the fire district list. So this plant looks almost identical, but it's on both lists. So
And how tall is a 5-gallon Photenia?
well, that's a good question. If I was a landscape architect, I could tell you. I'm sorry.
3 feet probably or something? 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah. And the wall is 6. So
Did you say that people down below cannot see this at all from their house?
that's correct. They could see it up at the driveway gate, but the fact that the ADU is not built, when the ADU gets built, they won't be able to see it from up by their gate.
Okay.
Yeah. And the building that you see, the roof you see is actually their garage, so it's, yes. Yeah, and their view, of course, is the other way, and then they have a back area, but that part that you see right there is their garage.
One more question. You mentioned that it was 6 feet, but the 6 feet, the blue area goes above. So from base of wall to top of wall in that zone is maybe 9
Right.
or so. Is
9 to
that-
0, yes,
Okay.
that's right. It's about 6 feet long, that area.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, and that's, the slope of the grade goes down, and, I mean, there was a way to solve it, but that was building a whole nother 6-foot-high retaining wall all the way across the property, and it just seems like, well, that's going to be more obtrusive than just this kind of little corner that is bent around the corner that nobody sees.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions from ADR members? Mark, do you have any questions? Great, we have no more questions. Thank you. And we'll now open it up to the public. If anybody at home would like to comment on this project, please raise your hand.
We have no raised hands.
Great. Who would like to go first?
I can go. I don't have any comments. I fully support the project. I think it's a good solution.
I do too. I just think it would be great if the planting at the base of the wall was fairly mature. So whatever effort could be made to make sure that those are hardy things. Also, I think just because an ADU is placed in a side setback, as it's allowed, 4 feet to the property line kind of thing, doesn't necessarily mean that patios and connections should always be allowed. And so I think that what supports this project is just kind of the existing buildings and the relationships between the houses and so forth. And so I think it makes perfect contextual sense, and I think it's great. I totally support it. But I don't think that this sets a precedent that just because you have an ADU very close to a side property line means that you can have a lot of patio close to a side property line. I don't think this is a case of that, but I just. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm speaking more to the projects that are going to come before us in the future. Yep.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I fully support the project and agree with Stephen's comments that just because you build something in a side yard setback that's completely allowed by law doesn't necessarily mean you're allowed to build other things, whether it's a second-story deck like we had last month, or anything else. But I think this project is great, and I fully support it.
And I agree with the others. I agree with the others. And ordinarily, I would say that you really should have bigger plants down there at that retaining wall. However, because of the location of that, thank you, Mark. Because of the location of that retaining wall and that nobody really can see it, actually smaller plants tend to do better over time. They tend to fill in, but usually we request if somebody can really see that you start out with mature planting. But I think here, this is okay. All right.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is conceptual advisory design review, which has no items. Is there any information, discussion, or new agenda items that the town has for us?
Just want to update that for 9 Thomas Court, they did remove that second-story deck. So they're going to town council, and it'll just be for replacing the siding.
Good. Well, I'm just telling them what the law was. They can ask for anything they want. Great.
Oh, and also, we're in the process of finding a consultant for the implementation of the housing element. And one of the programs is a design review streamlining to basically make the guidelines into more objective design standards. So that'll come before the ADR.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second?